even though they know what they are doing is wrong, but they can't stop themselves from having a secret relationship. This is Nova. Nova is 17 years old. Her father has been dead for a long time, so her mother has found herself another man, a very rich and attractive one, and Nova is forced to move to her adoptive father's house. Nova is very upset that she is leaving her home, neighborhood, and friends. When she enters the house of her adoptive father, she is faced with a large palace-like house and a whole bunch of servants. Her mother shows her her room, then from the balcony of her room through the leaves she notices a guy, but before she can see his face, her phone rings and she has to go back to her room. Since Nova has been on the road for several hours, she is quite hungry. For that, she visits the fridge to find something to eat. When she closes the fridge's door, she is surprised by the presence of Nick, her stepbrother, 22 years old son of Nicholas. Like most of siblings, they start to have problems and fight with each other from first time they meet. That same night, they all go out together to have a family dinner. Nova and Nick also continue playing with each other's nerves. After dinner, Nick gets up to go to work early/party. Nova also wants to go home. Nick's father wants him to take his sister home. Since Nick hates Nova, he is not willing to do it. But his father forces him to take his sister home first, then he can go to work. On the way home, their argument starts again and Nick leaves Nova in the middle of nowhere. Nova gets into another car and it turns out to be one of Nick's friends, and he is also going to the same party that Nick was going. Nova asks the guy to take her there with him as well. When Nova arrives at the party, Nick, the good father's boy, is working hard with bunch of girls at the same time. Nick's friend shows Nova a guy named Ronnie. She warns Nova not to get close to that guy. He is dangerous and he just got out of the prison. First, Ronnie tells one of his friends to bring a soft drink to Nova. After drinking, she realizes that it contains alcohol. Since Nova is 17 years old and is not used to drinking alcohol, she doesn't want to drink it, but he insists until Nick arrives and pushes the guy and threatens him to leave the party. Nova complains why Nick has to defend her, but Nick knows those guys benefit from drugging girls. Nova is slowly getting sick and Nick is forced to take Nova back home and sneak her into the house on her bed. A few days later, Nick participates in a street race, which is not his first time, by the way. He is interested in cars and racing. Rich life, that's what it is. Anyway, that night, in the middle of the fluster and loads of hormones, Nova, who put on quite some work on herself and is very sweet, catches Nick's attention for a moment, which causes him to fall back a little bit. But at the end of the match, he is the winner. Minutes later, she receives some pictures from an unknown contact, in which her best friend and her boyfriend are kissing. Nava, who gets pieced by this, randomly picks a guy from the crowd and takes him to a more private place and starts kissing him, and wants to take a picture of herself to get back at him. Nick catches her doing it and asks the guy to beat it. After checking her phone, Nick finds out why she was doing it. With that, he suggests if he help her with the picture, will she go home already? She agrees and they kiss for the first time under the excuse of a photo. After that, he takes Nova into his car and tells her to stay in there until he can find some friends to drive her home. But he goes on and gets busy with his girlfriend in another car and loses the track of time and forgets that he has another match with Roni. Nova gets bored after sending those pictures to her boyfriend and sits behind the wheel to check out how it feels to race. At the same time, Ronnie stops his car next to Nick's car in the starting point. Nova says it's not her car and she doesn't have any intention to race, but Roni tells her that the competition will start in a few seconds. If she doesn't start, he will be declared as the winner, and Nick will lose the money and his car. Nova starts the engine and the racing begins. Everyone loses their mind over her driving skill, and the fact that how nicely and clean she is steering the car. The reason for that is that her father was a rally driver and gave Nova professional training for a while. Nova wins the race and Roni, who is smoked by Nova, tells Nick that he cheated since he was not behind the wheel as he was supposed to. Nova was unaware of the existence of this rule and thought that if she beat Roni in the match, she would win. Nick accepts the defeat and gives Ronnie the money, plus his car. Everything ends not that ugly until Ronnie disrespects Nova, which Nick loses his temper and punches Roni in the face. Then everything gets chaotic. After some drama show, Nick and Nova run away by the help of their friend. The next night, Nick and Nova are finally alone, and Nava apologizes to Nick for causing him to lose his car and putting him in trouble. Then they kiss each other. Nick tells Nova that this is wrong because somehow she is his sister and she is 17 years old. They decide to keep the necessary distance. The next day, Nick sees Nova in the yard washing a car. Meanwhile, Nova's mother arrives and tells Nova that she has a surprise for her. Since her mother doesn't know about Nova's boyfriend's betrayal, she took her boyfriend Dan and brought him to Nova to cheer her up, because if Dan sees Nick, he will find out that it was Nick kissing Nova in the picture. So Nova begs him not to sneak around her boyfriend, but Nick is more stubborn than this, and in order to annoy Nova, he always comes around in front of Dan. Dan gets distracted for a moment and Nick pulls Nova into the pool and takes her to a secluded place and starts kissing her. When Nova returns to her room, she receives a threatening letter from an unknown person who says that she must pay back the price of what she did. A few nights later, Nick's rivals come to his door and beat him him later, when Nova is taking care of Nick's wounds, Dan comes and sees this scene. Nova tells Dan that she will forgive him for what he did, as far as he would keep what he saw to himself and to forget her. Dan, who is disappointed by not getting Nova back, and he has no choice but leave the next day. A few days later, Nick and his friends and Nova go out to the park. Apparently again, they make some love until their other friends arrive and they go to an underground illegal fight where Nova realizes that Nick also has a fight there. Nova strongly opposes this because she is afraid that Nick will get hurt or hurt somebody. She is strongly against violence because it reminds her of his father. She has a trauma from her father Violence, who used to beat Nova and his mother in the past. Of course, Nick wins the fight. After the fight, Nova tells Nick that their relationship is completely wrong, especially now that she sees how violent he is. This is the beginning of their distance. They don't go out together anymore. They don't even talk to each other anymore because they know that their talking will end up in the bedroom. All this time, Nova receives threatening messages from an unknown person, but she does not tell anyone about it. One day, Nick's father pulls him aside to talk to him. He tells him that Nova's father is not dead but has been in prison all this time, and the reason he is in prison is that he had threatened of killing Nova with a knife. Nava's mother has had reported him, and Nova testified against him, and that's how he ended up in prison in the first place. But he has been released from prison for a few days now, and he might want to harm Nova again, so they have watch out. One night, Nova goes with her friend to party. Nick gets worried and calls her, but Nova doesn't answer, and his friend is unable to hear what he says. That makes Nick to more worried and goes to Nova himself. Nova's real dad is waiting outside for Nova to come out to get her. Nova, who is quite drunk when she comes out, her father gets out of the car, but Nick arrives on time and takes Nova home. Nova and Nick sleep together at night. Early in the morning, Nick's father enters the room and sees them together on the bed. His father says that Maggie is not feeling well and it is better to go to the hospital, and leaves. Maggie is Nick's sister from his mother and her husband, and Nick really loves Maggie as a sister. Anyway, when they are coming back from the hospital, they talk about their relationship and their parents' life, who have a good relationship and they shouldn't break them apart by their affairs, so this is probably the last time they are alone together, and let's make the most of this for the last time. That's why they go to the beach together to have their last moments. It lasted until morning and they are out of love gloves, so they decide to go and get some. Nick goes to the store where Nova is waiting for him in the car. In the meantime, Roni and some other people kidnap Nova. Their parents report the situation to the police, and the police check the store's CCTV cameras where Nick recognizes Ronnie. Nick's father tells him that when this is over he should never touch her again. Now the story is that Nova's father was a cellmate with Roni in prison, and they have made a connection with the whole plan. Ronnie cooperates to execute her father's plan. Ronnie and his lads, in order to take his revenge and to ransom Nova's adoptive father for her release, demand $1 million in cash, but Nova's father, who does not want money at all, he just wants to see his wife suffer, and no longer needs Roni, knocks him unconscious, ties him up and leaves him in an abandoned building. Nick, who realized that Roni and Nova's father are also involved, tracks his car, which he lost to Roni before, and that's how they find the other party. After a frantic chase, Nova as the driver, Nick and Nova work together and get her father killed by the police. At the end of the movie, Nick goes back to Nova's room and wrestles together, and their parents, who have realized that they are still in a relationship, decide to do something serious about it and have to separate these two before they break apart the whole family.